Okay, I am in Freeport, Illinois, the site of the second Lincoln-Douglas debate, and probably the most important of the 7 debates. You can see the statues are behind me. They have Lincoln sitting and Douglas standing doing his talk. And in this particular debate, there was something called the Freeport Doctrine that came out of it. And it decided the presidential election, essentially, for the next 2 years later. So at this debate, Lincoln went first, and he decided that he would ask some questions of Douglas. So he did. And one of the questions was whether or not a state or a territory could declare itself to be to exclude slavery. And the idea that it could exclude slavery was a problem for Douglas. So Douglas didn't want to answer immediately, but finally he did, and he said yes, that's popular sovereignty, that the states could decide for themselves whether they want to be a free state or a slave state. So obviously if they were free, they would exclude slavery. The problem was that just a year before the debates in 1857, there was the Dred Scott decision of the Supreme Court. And Roger Taney, the Chief Justice, read the decision, and it said that Dred Scott, who had been a slave and brought into a free territory and a free state, just said that he sued for his freedom. He said, I'm living in a free state. There's no reason why I should be a slave. Slavery is banned here. So the decision said, no, you are still going to be a slave. And in fact, because you're a black man, there's no way you can even be a citizen. And in fact, you have absolutely no rights at all that any white man was bound to respect. Well, this created quite a havoc. The southern slaveholding states actually liked this idea, the Dred Scott decision, because it meant that they could bring their slaves into free states, not just free territories, but free states. And those states would not be able to do anything. So much for states' rights. The southern slave owners were all for violating the states' rights of those states in the North, in particular, who had banned slavery. So they would be able to allow to bring their slaves into those states and stay there and live there the rest of their lives with their slaves and keep bringing more slaves in. So effectively, it would be a slave state again. And this is the thing that Lincoln had warned about in his House Divided speech. So when Lincoln posed this question to Douglas in Freeport, and Douglas answered, he said yes, they could exclude the thing. The southern states didn't like this at all, and 2 years later, when they ran for president, the southern states refused to allow Douglas to be nominated for the Democratic Party. So instead, the Democratic Party split, and the Northern Democrats nominated Douglas. The Southern Democrats nominated John C. Breckinridge, who was the sitting vice president and a slave owner. And to make it worse, there was a third party called the Constitutional Union Party with John Bell. Their platform was basically, well, why can't we all just get along? We'll just keep things the way they are. And then there was Lincoln as a Republican. And because it all split, Lincoln won about 40% of the vote, which was actually pretty good considering they didn't even allow him on the ballot in all the southern states. But he won about 40% of the vote, but because the Democrats split, and then there was another split with the Constitutional Union, that was the majority, and he won the majority of the popular votes and the majority of the electoral votes, and he became president. And all of that was because of the Lincoln-Douglas debate in Freeport, Illinois, and the Freeport Doctrine. So later on, they're going to have a live-action debate here with George Bush and Tim Connors being Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas. Sorry. So we'll come back for that later. But right now, here's the statues for the Lincoln-Douglas debate. And you can see in this one, Douglas is standing and Lincoln is sitting, so it's a little harder to see the height disparity. But this is the second debate site, and I'll actually be going last to the very first debate site in Ottawa tomorrow. But tonight, the Lincoln Douglas debates.